I have a great deal of sympathy that we need to be very careful about the stress on junior doctors and the long hours that they work. But I think what has been achieved so far is there's been significant compromise on some of this, particularly around the issue of whether that we would see a slide back into the kind of dangerously long hours that my generation of doctors used to work. So I think actually having the retention of financial penalties was very important. So I think there has been progress during these negotiations.
But you're definitely against the strike.
I just don't feel that it's right for junior doctors to go on strike.
Right. I imagine it pleases you that the public, I mean, basically in our poll, support the junior doctors, particularly if you're not damaging emergency cover.
It pleases me, and it's no surprise at all, because I think the public trust doctors for a reason. We go into medicine because our one raison d'etre is to look after them.
And what about, on your third strike, you are planning to withdraw emergency cover, aren't you?
Yes.
There will be emergency cover from consultants and nurses, but why, given what the public think, don't you say, look, why don't we make the third strike the same as the other two, where we don't withdraw emergency cover?
I think I can't answer that from a BMA perspective, because I'm not a BMA activist, I'm just an ordinary grassroots doctor. But from my perspective, I think that we are clearly striking initially tomorrow in the safest way we can. So we're making a statement, and we hope very much that the government will listen to that statement while absolutely preserving our patients' safety. There is a period of time between tomorrow's strike and the all-out strike in February, and I see that period as an opportunity for this government to finally recognise that in coming up with a new contract based on an entire new set of NHS services, so the Conservative Party's 7-day NHS is new activity with no extra money whatsoever. So how is it provided, this new activity at weekends with no extra doctors? By making us work harder.
Okay. Sarah Wollaston, the public are clearly sympathetic to the strike, basically, and you're sympathetic to the cause.
Yes.
I mean, so what's wrong with the strike? I mean,
because first of all, I don't think it will achieve anything. I think it will harm patients, and ultimately I don't think that's right either for patients or for doctors. And I think particularly when they do move, if that does happen, to withdrawing emergency cover, I think there'll be significantly greater harms for patients, and I think that will risk undermining that very important bond of trust, because as we've heard, doctors are the most trusted profession, and I think there are grave dangers here that will be undermined.
Let me just put this to you. I mean, we asked the public whether they thought this was a strike about pay or whether it was about patient safety. I think you think it's about patient safety, don't you, Rachel?
Well,
the public kind of thought it was about pay, probably.
Yes, and again, that's not a surprise, because the Conservative Party, the government, have been furiously spinning this as a pay dispute. And from my perspective, that is categorically not why I am striking tomorrow. My vows as a doctor I take very, very seriously, and I withdraw my patient care tomorrow for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to protect my patients. For me, and for all junior doctors, the essence of this strike is not pay, it is safe staffing levels.
Do you believe that?
Well, I think the situation has changed significantly. And what this is about reducing the length of time within a working week that doctors can be forced to work. It's about reducing the number of consecutive nights that they can work. But I think the other thing that's been brought in here is greater safeguarding for doctors who want to report that they're being forced to work excessive hours. The financial penalties are being brought back to act as a disincentive. So I think there have been significant changes.
They're lying when they say it's not about pay, or are you saying?
I think there are a whole load of issues here. I used to teach junior doctors and medical students for 10 years before I went into politics, and I well remember back in 2007, for example, the huge distress that there was around the MTAS as it was brought in, the changes to the way doctors applied for jobs. And since then, what we've seen is a kind of that junior doctors lead a much more nomadic lifestyle. There are many things about the way they work today which are very difficult for them.
I mean, it's true, isn't it? In many respects, I'm imagining Sarah Wollaston, when she was a junior doctor, did these ludicrous kind of 90-hour shifts and work a week without a break.
Worse.
You're not doing that now, are you?
Sure, but with the greatest respect, Sarah Wollaston, you're now an MP. You haven't been a doctor for some time, and you certainly haven't been a junior doctor for many years.
Well, could I just come back on that point?
I'd like to answer the question, if I may. I'm a junior doctor on the front line now, so I know what's happening now. what I know right now is recruitment and retention of junior doctors is so bad that virtually every on-call shift I work in my hospital, there is a gap in the rota. And to put that in terms that the public can understand, that means instead of carrying my crash bleep for cardiac arrests, my emergency bleep, where I'm responsible for maybe 200 patients who might have emergencies through the night, I get given the bleep of another doctor who isn't there because there's a gap of the rota. So now I'm covering 400. This contract is going to reduce morale and make recruitment and retention worse, and hence the safety implications.
Right.
Sarah Willison, you wanted to just answer.
Yes, just to
briefly.
come back on the fact that as I say, I used to teach junior doctors and medical students, including Foundation 2 doctors in hospital, and up until 2015. I have a daughter who's a junior doctor, currently actually spending a year in Australia. But of course, it wasn't pay and conditions that drives many junior doctors to have that year abroad. It's often other issues to do with how they can coordinate their rotas with their partners and so on. So many other issues we need to address.
The argument will continue. Sarah Willison,
Thank
Rachel
you.
Clark, thanks both.